Okay, great. Well, let's get started. So, thank you everyone for coming. My name is James Bell. I am a co-organizer of the Scottish Ruby user group, and I have been asked today to facilitate a panel to think about what Sergey said at the beginning of Euruko. So it's 30 years of Ruby, 20 years of Euruko, and we thought we'd have some people to come together to talk about what that means. So we have 4 people with us here. And joining us all the way from Japan, we have Mats on a video call. Hi, Mats, you're on screen.
Hello.
So thank you for joining us live, Mats, and thank you for your keynote as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then I have questions to kind of like get us started to kind of think about Ruby all through its history, and then maybe a little bit about what happens in the future. So let me start. You'll recognize the speakers here. Let me start on my left. Stephen, when did you first come into contact with Ruby? And introduce yourself as well.
Okay. So I first came into contact with Ruby around 2000. I was doing Perl, web applications with Perl, and a friend told me, you should try Ruby, it's like object-oriented Perl. And I said, why the fuck would I want that? And about a year later, another friend said, you should try Ruby, it's like Smalltalk, but you can actually use it to talk to the rest of the world. And I thought, that's exactly what I need in my life. And I've been enjoying it ever since.
Okay, great. Carla.
Hello, everyone. You might remember me from my hate for passwords. So my first contact with Ruby was in 2014, and it was completely by accident. I was actually starting off as an Android developer for a startup, and because startups, I ended up doing many other things. And one of those things was building the Rails API to serve the application. So that was pretty much how I started.
Ah, okay. So building your Android app, getting the API together.
Yes.
Cool. Lucky you. Hannah.
Hello, so I'm Hannah. I work at GitHub, and as I mentioned, so I stumbled upon Ruby also by total chance when I was looking for some meetups which are happening in Zurich, and Ruby Monsters is a basically free course for women where we teach Ruby, so I stuck around for 2 years, and then I went through the curriculum, then I started with Rails, and I also coach there, and I do that until today. So for me, it was super nice introduction to the community, because basically, because of the people who started this in 2015, I can sit here today, and I can write code most of my day, and I really love it.
Awesome. Shibata-san.
Hello, everyone. So my Ruby experience is over the 25 year. So when I'm a student, so I got the Ruby languages, and I developed the simple CG application for the blog system. So I'm developing and maintaining and using it today. So with development version of Ruby version 3.3. So yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Mats, when did you first come into contact with? Oh wait, no. Go on.
February 2024, when I met Ruby. That's the day I met Ruby.
Excellent. I was actually going to start a question with you, Mats, which came from a Q&A from the keynote you gave, which was you said that Ruby wasn't originally designed for web applications. So what was your guiding principle? Why did you build Ruby? What did you intend it for in the first place?
Back in 1990, web is not popular. Maybe some people knew the World Wide Web, but most of us didn't know about the existence of so the Ruby originally created just for fun. Yeah, it was Ruby. But I wanted to make the good programming language. And at that time, I used shell scripts and the programs often. So if I create the programming powerful enough to replace Pro, be favor of language. Yeah, I took to make it, and then became very great.
Okay, cool. I was gonna. You're dropping in and out a little bit, Matt. So I'm gonna switch to the in audience for a moment, and we see if we can get your connection better. Stephen, you obviously spoke about RSpec and your great love for it, and also your contributions to Minitest, which now ship with Ruby. It's a standard gem. Like, how has testing changed in the time you've been, using it?
So I think that the main difference today about testing versus when I sort of got started in the community and is that it's mature. Everyone is at least aware that testing exists, and that doesn't really that's not necessarily true in other language communities. Everyone in our community is aware that testing exists, and so they at least feel some guilt if they're not writing tests. And that is the most important thing.
What guilt?
Yes. I was raised Catholic as a child, so it's a major motivator. And I think that the tooling is really mature now. I really struggle when people ask me things like, where do you want RSpec to go next? And I tell them I haven't known that for 12 years at least. Because the tooling is so mature, I don't think we need a lot more of it. I am working on some small things, but it's mostly stuff that other people have already done better than me, and I'm just doing it for fun. So I really think that the theme is maturity, and I'm very happy with that. I like boring technology.
Carla, I'm interested because you said you came in from an Android thing. How did you find testing different between those two communities?
Well, again, I was in a startup, so we had to do things fast. And I don't know if any of you have worked at a company where testing was like not mandatory. Please raise your hand because I would like to not feel alone. Okay, great. So that was my thing with Android. At some point, I wanted to include some tests, but I also had to do other stuff at the same time, so it was hard. So definitely, and the difference between Android and Ruby is that once I got into Ruby and Rails, like I think the first course that I did was using TDD. So it was like, oh, okay, I need to do this first, and then actually implement my code. So it was definitely a whole different experience.
That's interesting. I'm not trying to go down the line, but the next natural question is, Hannah, when you were learning at Ruby Monsters, when you encountered that, how much testing is on in that experience, that curriculum? And I know you teach there now as well, right? So is testing a big part of what you do there?
Yes, so there's a bunch of us coaches who develop the materials. So when I came, we already had initial materials, but we strive to make them better and adapt them. And what I really like that we have a bunch of exercises, and I think I can't really say which lesson it is, but it's in the first 10, and we already have like exercise with mini tests where the participant learn, okay, this is how it looks when the test fail, and your task is to implement the code so it fails. And then we use this approach, this DDD approach, during the course of the action. So we are coming back and back to this concept. And we try to set it like, okay, this is how you do things, and you wouldn't even think about other way.
Hiroshi, thinking about testing, you write code that's at a slightly lower level than many people in this room because they're writing web applications, and you're writing the command line tool and other things as well. How does testing fit into your development?
Matt, Can you translate
Yes.
it question?
For sure. Let's say it in Japanese.
Yeah.
そうです。Ruby はテストを書くのがすごい楽しい言語だと思っていて、で、mock と
I
か
think Ruby is the foundation test.
で、mock とかスタブとかがすごいやりやすくて、こう自分の自由にテストをかけるのがすごい魅力だと思っています。
The stars is much easy, and then you can write. You can feel freedom in writing.
いいですか。で、自由でとても楽しいので、テストを書いているのか、ターゲットコードを書いているのかよく分からなくなるのが結構僕は困る時があるので、そこはちょっと勉強しながらテストを書くということを気をつけています。
The testing Ruby is the feel freedom, so that I feel like the confusing writing test and writing the production code. That's one of my issues, so that I'm being careful about separating code and the code.
Thank you. Sorry that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mats. Yeah, live translation over a video link is a first for me as well. That's excellent. Excellent work. Cool. Mats, I was going to ask you, you mentioned, we sort of talked about this in the previous question, but you mentioned the impact that Rails had on Ruby as a whole. When you think about when you first saw Rails and like how has that changed, I guess even the way you think about developing Ruby, if it has changed it?
Yeah. Around 2004 and 2000, heard about the Ruby weird web application framework in Ruby Rails, which is weird, different from other frameworks. But Rails is not really web application framework for Ruby, nor even the first web application in among other programs. It's a kind of latecomer, but I was surprised how it attracted people for productivity. I was kind of surprised how DHH and the Rails community presented effectiveness and productivity writing web application. Back then, I was less value public relation of open source software, but DHH and the Rails community open eyes.
I wonder if anyone else in the panel has any thoughts about like the impact Rails has had on their experience of Ruby. Feel free to jump in.
I really like that Rails kind of legitimized Ruby for a lot of people. I was already really enjoying Ruby and using it in my day-to-day work, and when Rails came along, it was suddenly not that weird to suggest using it at work, and so Rails is the reason why I get paid, why I can get paid to write Ruby, and I don't think I would have been. It wouldn't have been sort of a requirement of the job before Rails existed. So I'm really glad about that.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I had a similar experience, but because I arrived a little bit later to the scene of Ruby and Rails, I was directly introduced to Rails. And because I was doing TDD and all of that, I was learning Ruby at the same time. And I think Rails for me was a tool to not to dig so deeper in the language at first, just learn how to use this tool to build your web application at the time or your API at the time. And then later on, I was able to dig deeper more in the language. But it was definitely the first contact, or like the first, yeah, that's the first contact that I had with Ruby. And I appreciate Rails for that, 100%.
So I think Rails does a really good job in explaining how you can use Ruby to be productive and showing it in a very effective way. When we learn and teach, we try to not show people Rails at all for like first 30 lessons, because it's nice to start and start fast, but especially when people start to learn, it's important that they understand the difference between Ruby and Rails, and they often don't. And there's so much magic in Rails, which is great, but it can be confusing. So it's really good to understand, okay, this is Ruby, we use it to do Rails, and with that we can actually do cool stuff on the web.
I think so. Rails is a great customer of Ruby languages. So besides our Ruby core team, so we sometimes break the compatibility or some of APIs. So we ask the Rails developer or Rails core team at the first. So how is this incompatibility? So Rails core team will feedback. So no, don't break that. Or oh, it's okay. So we will fix the Rails side. So Ruby core team and the Rails core teams collaborate so in the future to develop the Ruby ecosystem, I think.
Awesome, cool. I've just been asked by the organizers a thing that you never want to ask at a conference, but could people put their phones in the auditorium on airplane mode so that we can, that helps with the Wi-Fi connection for Matt's? I am so sorry for asking you that. Cool. Let me move. I was Carla, I was gonna ask you. You wrote an awesome blog post on the Okta blog, I think, was the Auth0 blog.
The Auth0 blog, yeah.
Yeah. About 30 years of Ruby history. What was the most surprising or interesting thing that you discovered when you wrote that post? And Matt can correct your knowledge while you're here.
I mean, so I think the first thing that I learned is that Ruby is actually 30 years old. I knew it was about 20-something, but when I figured out, okay, no, this is 30 years old, that was the first shock. And then the second one was, so when I was working as a software engineer, we were using Ruby 2.7, I think. And because of reasons, it was kind of challenging to bump the version because, you know, microservices and whatever. But the thing is, I haven't had the chance to use Ruby 3. And so when I was doing this research, and for context, this is a blog post I wrote about telling a little bit about the history of Ruby, where we were, where we are now, and where we're going. And in the where we're going part, it was a lot about, okay, what is Ruby 3 doing? So I learned about Raptors. I had no idea about Raptors before. That was pretty interesting. And all the performance stuff and improvements that are being implemented in Ruby 3. So those things, I think, were the most interesting. But pretty much the fact that it's 30 years, that was what, like, okay, this is big.
And if you haven't found it, if you look at Carla's name on your favorite search engine and search for 30 years of history, you'll get to the blog post. And my favorite thing is your digging out of a conversation, Matt's, that you had the name, like going with the name of Ruby to begin with. It must have been an IRC, was it?
Yes. So first of all, hi, Mats. I'm a big fan. Thank you for giving me a job. Indirectly. Second of all, yes, finding that chat was challenging because there were like a bunch of images around about this conversation of, okay, what name do we want to give Ruby? But I wanted to find the actual resource, and I think I found it on Matt's page. And that's where I got it from. But yeah, that was super interesting.
Can you repeat that, Matt?
Probably in my blog page.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where I found it, and I just put the reference because I think like this is history, you know. This is like big. At least it was for me. I don't know about you, but it was for me. I was like, damn. So yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Cool. Hannah, we talked a bit about how you came in through Ruby Monsters. How has like your experience to that community shaped your perception of Ruby, and how has that changed with your involvement in it over the last 5 years?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to enter the Ruby community thanks to all the events or thanks to the community prepared events. So for me, there was always a big part of Ruby itself, like how you look after the new developers, how we want to show what Ruby can do. And so as a part of that, I afterwards co-organized Rails Girls. So I was looking at the Rails Girls Summer of Code. There were many, many nice things going on, which were kind of either shut up or attenuated in the last couple of years, partly of pandemics, partly about other things. So for me, the community aspect was really, really big. And also attending the conferences, meeting people from all around the world, but also actually at the last Euruko in Helsinki, I learned most people from the Swiss Ruby community. So just the fact that we all went to a conference brought us also more together, what I really appreciate.
Cool. Hiroshi, you said you learned Ruby at university. How has this changed in Japan? How do people like pick up Ruby now? How do people learn Ruby? New people coming into the community.
日本で Ruby を勉強する方法がどういうふうに変わったの？なんかその昔はなんかみんなバラバラで勉強したけど今はみたいな。難しいですね。
Sorry.
Sorry, so it's a difficult question in English and Japanese. So in Japanese situation, so the university student learn the Python or TypeScript. So because many of company still uses Ruby and Rails, so including my company, so it's a truly difficult problem to how to run Ruby and Rails for the new or student people. So one of the things is Rails Girls or other local Ruby community. So we welcome the new student or young people. So and we will introduce the RubyCon or the Ruby conferences or local meetups, and so I have no idea to resolve your question. Sorry.
Oh, that's good. Mats, how have you seen the people coming into the community changing over the 30 years? Presumably, you know, very small first, people you just spoke with, and then it's kind of grown and changed.
From my standpoint, biggest change is the amount I explained in the keynote. You know, the 30 years ago, we are engaged. So if we buy the software, but nowadays we write software that supports the world to run fast. That's kind of making more complex and more difficult. The change is the web itself changes the software architecture. Then now we kind of experience new coming of the AI era, and which Ruby really good at. But the value of the web application is still there, and we are making a lot of value for applications. So the value of the language and the Ruby community around the Ruby is still rising, I believe.
Great. Hiroshi, I was going to ask about dependency management. You work on Ruby Gems and Bundler, and even when I came into the community 15 years ago, we didn't have tools like this to manage dependencies. How has that changed over the years, and how has that made things easier?
So, yes, so dependency management is a difficult problem, and I also said so. I would like to resolve the build error, or install error, or like Nokogiri or gRPC gem or other stuff. So it problem for the new people and the young people. So I want to make more easy way to provide the installation or other build environment and dependency conflict. So the current bundler or Ruby gems is still difficult to resolve some of error like build or installer. So I and Ruby gems squad team, so we try to do not happen the build failure or version conflict, and improve the help message or their error message or some of console message.
I feel like I haven't had story time from Stephen in a bit. You must have dependency management stories of some kind like going on. I mean, I remember when I first started out, we had we had gems installed on a server, and to find the gems, you'd have to go onto the server, type gem list, what's installed, what version is installed, and then like when you wanted to install those things to test them locally, you'd have to go back to your server and copy those lists out. But presumably you have stories.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of problems in the early days of RSpec, especially with dependency management, because we were doing so much dirty shit with the metaprogramming that the largest part wasn't the dependency management in RSpec itself. It was the projects that depended on RSpec, because we had to then figure out what else are they using. And the biggest problem back then was because we didn't have all of your Ruby gems were system gems. So someone would have a problem, but it was just something that was installed, not necessarily something they were using. So they didn't realize that the foobar gem was actually causing problems because they weren't thinking about it, they weren't using it, it just happened to have been installed. I still have I still have bad memories of, does everyone, or a lot of people here remember when we had, Bundler and Jeweler and Isolate, and Isolate was the best, by the way. It should have just been merged into Ruby gems, and then we could have wiped the stain of Bundler from the history of the community. But we had 10 different management things. So every project was using a different way of managing their dependencies. And I'm really glad, even though it was the wrong one, I'm really glad that we have a standard tool that everyone uses in the same way. It's really nice now.
Conventions.
But I miss Isolate.
Duly noted. Duly noted. I know we pushed the time back. How much time have we got left, Sergey? 4 minutes. Okay, great. Well, I was going to go and see if there are questions in the audience, but I'm going to ask about the future instead, because time is pressing. So I have a final question for you, Matt, so I'll get there at the end. But just reflecting yourself, Stephen, on what do you hope for the future, for like the next 10 years, the next 20 years of Ruby?
Wow.
And everyone else gets a chance to practice.
I don't think that I actually wanted anything Ruby has gotten since about 1.8. I don't like the new hash syntax. I do like stabby procs; those are badass. For me, the best part of the improvements in Ruby has been the speed improvements and the reliability improvements. I think that I, I would always love to see that more, but Ruby's been perfect for me for so many years. It's just like the difference between Christmas as a child and Christmas as an adult. It's just, yes, it's nice and it's great, but it just doesn't, the new releases just don't have that magical feeling anymore. But I love what everyone's doing in the community, and I love being a part of it. So I'm still excited to see what everyone's doing in Ruby.
So apart from all the technical part, for the next 10 years or for the next few years, I would love to have more. We talked about a lot about including more junior developers, but apart from junior developers, I think just that new developers see Ruby as a great programming language to start in the industry, and not that it's only some others like JavaScript or Python or whatnot. I would love to see that in the future, and I think we as a community are the ones who can make that happen. And yeah, I think that's what I want to. I want to see more people using Ruby because it makes me happy, and I think it will make them happy as well.
So even though I'm around the Ruby world just like last 5 years, what really struck me recently was the change of how companies see Ruby and Rails as a tool, as a part of their tool. And it's not just something which community builds and they'll work on, they will just use, and then if it doesn't work, they'll complain and say, okay, maybe there's another tool. But like actually actively invest in developing Ruby itself so that it fits the needs of everyone on the small companies, big companies. It's for web development, but it would be great if Ruby would strengthen its position also in wider variety of uses. And so that would be my wish for the next years to come, that more companies see this as an important investment and they actively contribute to Ruby.
So your question is, what is the next 10 years of Ruby? Yeah, okay, I see. So I'd like to make you easily upgrade Ruby versions. So yeah, so
Please.
yeah, security incident or security risk is very paying for the developers. So we need to upgrade the Ruby 3.2 from the 2.5 or 2.7. Yes, it's a very hard things and complex, difficult work. So I'm working to extract some of all the stuff like net IMAP or net SMTP or other old libraries from the Ruby core repository. So you can easily upgrade their libraries with gem update or net SMTP or net FTP only. So not you don't need to upgrade the Ruby interpreter, Ruby versions. So I'm working to extract their libraries from the Ruby, and you can easily upgrade the Ruby libraries and the Ruby language, Ruby versions. So I'm working with that.
Awesome. Mats, a final question to you then. 30 years ago, you created this language that could be called Carl and ended up being called Ruby. 30 years from now is 2053. What do you hope for Ruby in that time?
Want to be alive there at the time. Yeah. To accomplish that, we would do things, improving form, tools, and supporting community, and maybe probably we have some kind of dependency management or isolation. Yeah, we have several proposals space. So that we can implement that and then make it Ruby 4 or something. Yeah. The survival in the next years is my goal.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you very much. Can I get a round of applause for the panel? And domo arigatou gozaimasu, Mats, for calling in from Japan. And we'll hopefully see you next year. Thank you, everyone.
See ya.